If you work with any text within Brizy and you select the text, head on over to the settings, you will see that there is a section called the HTML tag. And if you look at the drop-down box, you're going to see you have a P, then you have H1 all the way to H6, and then you have PRE at the bottom. If you have no idea what this is, then welcome to Back to Basics with JP. We're going to talk a very introductory overview of what this is so that at least you don't get lost in this world of HTML tags and you can do proper assignment for this within your headings, subheadings, and all the text over your website. To kick it off, let's bring in a text element. When working within Brizy, and this is for all variations of Brizy, whether it's Pro or Free, Cloud, or WordPress, if you want to create paragraphs or if you want to create headings, you're going to use the text element for that. You find it there under Essentials. I'll click, hold, and drag, and anywhere you see on the page a thick gray line appears. That's where you can drop it. Let's put it here under the clickety-click. This is how all text elements come in with a little bit of placeholder dummy text for you to work with. And it is set, if you click on it and go to the styling here in the sidebar on the left, to this setting over here, which is the paragraph setting. If I select this, let's just have a look at what's going on here. For our desktop display, this means that every time you bring in a text element, it's going to use this paragraph setting. It's going to go to the font of B Vietnam Pro, a size of 18 pixels, normal weight, a line height of 1.7, and no letter spacing applied. Jump back to the text element and we select it, and then we go to the T for typography, and up here we can see why it is showing that. Let's capture that moment just one more time. Whenever you bring in a text element, it's going to apply the paragraph styling by default, and that is why when you go to T for typography, it says paragraph. If you want to change this to a heading, let's first change it to a heading, my new heading. All you need to do is go to T for typography, and you can select from any of the presets that comes within Brizy all the way from heading 1 to 6. If this is a brand new project installation for you within Brizy, then you're going to have these defaults already over here in the styling option. If you want to make changes to it, for example, you want to change the font, you can do it over here, change the size, change the weight, etc. But let's go ahead first and assign the heading 1 over here. So I'll go to typography and I'll select heading 1. And doing so, we have now a size of 70 pixels. It's bold, a line height of 1.2, and a letter spacing that's negative at 1.4. This we get all the way from over here under heading 1. But a little bit removed from this comes that other feature we started talking about at the very beginning, which is the HTML tag. By assigning this one as a heading 1, I head on over to Settings, and I will see my HTML tag says H1. Let's go back to typography and let's make this a heading 2. And again, the style it's getting here, it's getting it from over here. Every time I have a heading 1, it's going to get it from here. Now, when I go to the settings, you will see that my HTML tag says H2. And I guess you can understand what's going to happen next. If I go to something like, let's put it on heading 4, we expect to see the HTML tag as H4. Let's do that. Yes, it's H4. So the heading 1 is H1, heading 2 is H2, and so on, all the way to heading 6 and H6. And this brings us now to actually what this is all for. What is happening is that your page is kind of like an index, and then it starts with your main heading, and then you have subheadings under that, and then you have your subheadings. So your main heading on your page is always H1. That's why it's that big heading. But what is very important is that you should always try to make your H1, your main heading, kind of the purpose of your page. Like if it's a home page, your product, or if it's about us, make it about us. And in many cases, your page already is kind of like your H1. Let's go to this setup I have here, and let's go ahead and change them also. We can see the differences, and then we talk a little bit more about the differences. So I start here with heading 1, and then this one I'm going to put on heading 2. And as you can see, it is designed to progressively, or rather not progressively, but more increasingly get smaller. As it decreasingly gets smaller, and it gets smaller and smaller until you get to a heading 6, and usually your smallest part will be your paragraph setting. We bring in our paragraph again over here, which is a normal text element, select it, and we go to the settings. You will see it is set to P for paragraph. How this works is that at your hero section, which is at the very top of your page, we go for the heading 1. If I create a new hero section here, and I just have a simple image in the back, I will most probably make this my heading 1 section. This is the title of your page, and it says what your page is all about. Then subsequent sections where I have subdivisions of that page with the same topping, I'm going to make that a heading 2. And every time that I create a new section, I want to keep that also a heading 2. So you can call this one heading 2.1 just for our reference, and heading 2.2. If I have any other text under this that have a heading, I want to make that a heading 3. And this usually happens if I create something like a column. I'll drag it. Remember, it's still in the same section, in the same block as heading 2.1. And let's duplicate this one. I go grab my heading 3, move my page down a little bit, and I drop it in here. So I'll call this one heading 3.1. Then I'll duplicate this one, make that heading 3.2, and I'll duplicate it, and I'll make this one heading 3.3. The moment, though, you bring in actual text that is for information that you want people to read, you stop with the heading assignment. If I want to bring in information about this heading, let's say it's my services, I bring in my text, and I leave it on P4 paragraph. Now I stop with that indexing. I don't do 1, I don't do 2, I don't do 3, and I don't go to 4. If I were to divide this even further, if a crazy case like that does exist, and sometimes it does, then I'll go ahead and I'll grab my heading 4, put that in there. We call this one heading 4.1. We duplicate that. I'll drag it into this column. I'll call this 4.2. And now when I put my text under any of them, and it's again information, more about my product, I keep it on a P. So the moment you get to that point where you don't use headings anymore, you stop with your assigning of a H1, H2, H3, H4, H5, etc. This is the idea. Coming back to the purpose which we talked about. This is very important for Google, Bing, and any other browser that during the night or during the day, they send out their bots to crawl the internet. And these bots are not the negative ones you think of that's going to hack your site. What they do is they actually just come to your website and they read your website. The reason they read your website is they want to understand what's going on there. This helps them to categorize your website. Like if it's Brizy, it's going to say, this Brizy, they have a product. It's for making websites. There's one for WordPress, and there's a cloud solution as well. And with that information, when somebody searches for great website builders for WordPress, it's going to return the results. If your website isn't indexed well, and if you don't use keywords, which we can also talk about very briefly in a moment, then Google is kind of not going to give you the best write-up. It's kind of going to skip you maybe even, but you're not going to get that attention you so want that people can find you. So the HTML tagging is very important to help search engines to index you properly, to go from the top down and understand what's going on your website, and then return that as a result for people who go into Chrome, who go into Edge, and they want to find something that is related to a product. Very important. Now let's talk about do's and don'ts. First of all, avoid using more than one heading on a page. This is the standard, but there are exceptions. If you have a page that deals with sections that are completely removed, then you can use more than one heading on a page. But you should really try and not do that. Your heading 1 usually goes into your hero section, and it talks about that page or your business. The other sections on your page, like maybe you have services, features, testimonials, and a contact form, for that you use heading 2. Any other subdivisions that you have, and you break it down into feature context, you use heading 3. Now here, I will tell you, if you ever go to a heading 4, you are in the minority. Most websites actually just go to heading 2. They don't need to even go to heading 3. Don't overcomplicate your website. The moment you run into heading 4, consider maybe you are doing too much on your website. Really take a step back, look at your product. Is it necessary for you to have all these subdivisions on one page? Many cases, yes. But again, if you go to many big websites, you're going to find that they don't go all the way to heading 4. And then whenever you get to text where you are giving out your information, here you are going to stick with paragraphs. Now that you understand this, let's talk about assigning HTML tags. Now I have this heading here, that's my 3.1, but it applies the styling over here of this heading 3. Below this, I'm going to create another section. So what I'll do is I'll duplicate this section and I'll call this section now 2.2. My problem is that I want to have heading 3s, but I don't want them to have this styling. I want them to be different. For some reason, I'm using a different font maybe, or a different weight of the font. If I go ahead and I change this heading 3 here, and let's say I'm going to put it on normal, let's make it thin and we make it a little bit smaller. I want to create this modern look for this section. My problem is when I go back up here, you will see that it applied it because it's global styling. I'll undo this with Control-Command-Z. We go back to the original. What I'm going to do instead is I'm going to create a new preset. To do that, I'll go to my styling over here, and then I will say Add New, and then give it a name where it says New Style Number 10. For my reference, I'll just call it H3 Alternative. I'll keep it on B Vietnam Pro. To set it up over here, the first thing I will do is go over to this one, heading 3.1. And then I will set it up and you'll find it over here at the bottom, H3 Alternative. Now I'll go back H3 Alternative, select it, and I can make changes. Let's say I put it on 2.28. I'll put it on thin, and the line height I'll keep like that. Select it and go to the settings, and you can see it is H3. And the reason it is H3 in this case is because we have already used this H3 heading and we just changed it. But if I bring in another text element, for example, and I drop it down below here and I call it heading 3 Alternative, we know that by default it's going to be a P. Now when I go to typography and I scroll to the bottom, I say H3 Alternative, go over to the settings, you will see it is still P. So currently, when you are creating a new custom preset and you want to use it for a specific style like a H1 or H2 or H3, you have to remember by default, it's not going to assign the HTML tag you have in mind. I say currently because I hope that we can move this feature also at one point over here. What you will do for now is to go ahead, select it, put it on your new created preset, and then for the setting over here, we go to HTML tag and I put it on H3. And the best way when you are doing any kind of design in a website, instead of now doing that for this one and this one, you're simply going to go to this one, copy it, and drag it in there. Because now you know it has retained that H3 setting. So, short, in review, when you have a page in your hero section, this one over here can be your H1. And remember I said can be, and you will see it is set to H1. Subsequent sections, blocks below that, you set to H2. And they need to describe what is expected when you look inside that block and that section. Make sure you do some good keyword research. And if you don't know good keywords, you simply go to the AI text element over here and you give it a prompt. In this case, I'm going to say, write a heading for my section that is about listening to podcasts on the internet using keywords for strong SEO. I'll just throw in those keywords in SEO so that the AI knows what I'm looking for, and I'll go ahead and press enter. And it gives you a great heading, top 10 podcasts. The word top and a number like 10 is really top searches in the world of keywords. And then you have a word like engaging, which is a very powerful word, and then interest. All of this are very important. You will see it added quotation marks. This AI loves to add quotation marks whenever you ask it to write a heading or a subheading or a tagline. So just go ahead and remove that, not the end of the world. If I want to, I can shorten it, but I think this is actually a good one. And now I know I have an H2 heading, which I have set here up at heading 2 with great keywords. So when Google comes and when Bing comes and the others come. They're going to find this and they're going to quickly understand what this section is about. As we go down, we're going to find another one. And one thing you have to note on this page, that there is no need so far for any H3. We again have here H2, which is the title of the section. We can go here, definitely a H2, and so on. One thing you have to be careful of is to use a style, and I'm going to show you, from the preset list as a style, and then forgetting that it is actually assigned to a H1 to H6 value. What I have here is this in-between little info section. And this is clearly not an H2 setup because we can see that the font style, everything is different. But as a matter of fact, this is a section by itself, and it technically is a H2 section. But because I used a different format here, if I go to T, you will see I put it on heading 4. Now, my intention here was to use the formatting of heading 4. But remember, this is at the top of a section. There isn't an H3 above it. There is no H2 above it. It's just standing here all by itself. And that means if I apply the heading 4, the setting is going to set to H4. This is kind of a no-no. Try to avoid it. If you are creating headings that are going to be standalone, like I showed you earlier, and not connected to the block or to the setup, rather go ahead and put it on a P. And the great thing here is that if you switch it around to a P, you're going to see it won't affect the styling. So you still have this styling from the H4, but now you've set it to P. Me, I will even go ahead and maybe put it on a H2 because I still see it as kind of a section by itself. With this, I hope you take away that you don't always have to connect the styling, how big the font is, the weight of the font, with the assignment of the HTML tag. I'll just click back here on T for typography and you can see it's still on heading 4. We used that styling, but we have changed it manually over here to H2 or to P. Now, what does this mean for you going away from here? Go to the site that you have created. Go to the very top, and you can either use your hero section heading as a H1 or a H2. Then your sections, if you have a heading for your sections like these do, make them a H2. If you have sub-headings under that with more info boxes, like I did here at the bottom, where we have H3, let's remove these guys quickly. Then you do H3. The moment you go into text or information, that's sentences, go for a P for paragraph. There is more to learn about HTML tags, and this you should do at a minimum to get your website ready so that those crawlers from the different browsers can come and find exactly what's going on your web page and your website. It's really important, otherwise you're not going to get the results on the search engines that will allow people to find you. Before we finish off, a quick note that if you have been following the discussion on AI in the news, there is a debate going on whether this structure is still important. Because what AI is doing currently, it reads your entire page. And when somebody goes to ChatGPT or they go to Gemini or to Meta, wherever, what happens is that the AI is not really that concerned about the H1, H2, or H3. The AI looks at the information as a whole, and it then gives you the information in the condensed form as to your prompt. But the recommendation remains, as long as we have search engines, and most probably the AI is also sneaking into that a little bit, go ahead and always make sure that you have assigned the HTML tags properly. And be careful, I would say that's probably my biggest takeaway from this. Be careful to go ahead and just use these as styling options without understanding that they're actually also assigning the HTML tag. If you want the styling of the H4, for example, but you don't need an H4 HTML tag, you do what we did up here, and you go back into it, to the settings, and you change it manually to the one that you desire. And the last point I will remind again is you shouldn't skip. Don't go from H2 to H4 or from H3 to H6. Make sure you always go H1, H2, H3. And then if your next is a new section, that's H2 again, H2, and maybe you have a H3 again. But in most cases, like this landing page we have here, you're going to find that you hardly ever will use anything higher than an H2. Stay tuned for more Back to Basics with JB by subscribing to our YouTube channel, and remember to visit us at brizy.io.